Alright folks, it's time to get stompy. We're reviewing Tiny Frontiers, Mecha and Monsters by Nocturnal Media. If you've been a follower of this channel for a while, you know that we've had Alan Barr on here, the designer of Tiny Frontiers, Mecha and Monsters. If you haven't checked that out, I'll put a notation here in the video. Please click on that and watch our RPG session with Alan. Tiny Frontiers, Mecha and Monsters will be available on DriveThruRPG shortly, so if you are interested in picking up a copy digitally, you can check out DriveThruRPG.com. So let me give you a rundown of the core book. Basically, it uses D6s. So if you are playing, you are going to roll 2 D6s, and if you roll a 5 or 6, you succeed. If not, then you don't. If something puts you at a disadvantage, you roll 1 less D6. If you have an advantage in the situation, you roll 1 more D6. You have a greater chance of accomplishing your task or not. But what about the book itself? Let me show you the contents of the book, and you can decide for yourself if Tiny Frontiers, Mecha and Monsters is something you'd like to pick up. Alright folks, let me just give you a little brief overview of what the book entails. As you can see, the front illustration is the image that we saw on the Kickstarter. It's a giant mech fighting a giant kaiju that's spewing some sort of laser breath. It's really dynamic, great illustration right off the bat on the front of this book. The first thing I will note is that the illustrations in this book are top-notch. Let's just show you some of it. Some really great full-page illustrations in here as well as some quarter-page illustrations. Just really, really dynamic kaiju and mechas that, if you're a fan of this genre, you will really like the illustrations that are in this book. It's just really, really great. The first 49 pages of this book is the rule system. The first chapter is just how to play. The second chapter is how to create your jockey and mecha. Your jockey, of course, is the person that's controlling the mecha inside, and it gives you various traits for that jockey, and then you also have different classes for your mecha. You have Striker, Scout, Knight, Titan. You have systems that you can choose from, sensor systems, weapon systems, defense systems, movement systems for your mecha. There's just a lot of things here that you can choose from. You also have kaiju creation, so you could actually play as a kaiju if you wanted to instead of a mecha. It tells you how kaiju heal, how they recover energy, the different forms of kaiju, the different evolutions, weapons evolutions, defense evolutions, movements, just great. And then it also gives you a section on how to run the game as a game master, and the 5th chapter is enemies. It gives you some really great charts. It tells you how to randomize a city, so you just roll 3d6s and you can come up with different city scenarios, different terrain scenarios. And then chapter 6 is a chapter on Outriders, combining and transforming mecha and kaiju. This is really cool because if you are a fan of things like Voltron, Transformers, this kind of lets you throw that setting into this RPG. So that's really, really cool, and I'm glad that he was able to put this chapter in the book. Being a kid from the 80s, this is really going to be a lot of fun to play. Another great illustration of a combining mecha right there. And it also gives you some vehicles to choose from. And chapter 7 is the devastation gauge, and it gives you a chart for your major city features and special city features, And then it also tells you how to use the devastation gauge. Basically, the way that it works is if the city has too much destruction, or maybe you prevent the city from taking too much damage, you can automatically win or lose the setting based on this chart. And then you've got 115 pages of micro settings. So, folks, what are my thoughts on Tiny Frontiers Mecha and Monsters? I think Tiny Frontiers Mecha and Monsters is a great system. It's so much fun. It's rules light, which is great. This is a great, I don't know if you want to say a starter RPG, but it is good for folks that maybe haven't done a whole lot of role-playing. The other thing that I like about this game is that it uses D6s. And who doesn't have D6s? You can just pick up a handful of them and play. It doesn't require all sorts of different types of dice to play this game. The other thing that I like about this game is that if you're GMing this game, you don't really need a whole lot of time to prep and get a session in place. The micro settings do a great job. There is, like 115 pages of micro settings, and when I first heard the term micro settings, I thought, okay, well, Alan's just going to put in, a page to get folks started on session. No, these micro settings are anything but micro. They're 3-4 pages long, and yeah, I mean that's not as big as a module or anything, but it gives you a lot more information than I originally thought. So basically, you can just read the 3 or 4 page micro setting and then just get going. A lot of them even have suggested kaiju stats and suggested mecha stats. So there really isn't a whole lot of prep time with getting a session to fire. I could see playing Tiny Frontiers Mecha and Monsters at like a convention, or maybe just or you get friends together that don't get together a whole lot, and you just want to play an RPG, and you don't want to do you don't want to start a campaign that you have to meet over and over and over and over again to accomplish. You can just sit down, play for 2 or 3 hours, and be good. It's that type of system, which I think is great. The price is great. I think it's probably going to run you about $15-20 on DriveThruRPG. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what they posted on the site for. But I would be surprised if it's more than that. So if you're like me and you're a fan of kaiju movies, Transformers, Voltron, all of that genre, especially from the 80s, I think you're going to want to pick up a copy of Tiny Frontiers Mecha and Monsters by Nocturnal Media and designed by Alan Barr. One thing I will note is that Tiny Frontiers Mecha and Monsters is what the designer calls an expandalone book to Tiny Frontiers the RPG, which is a space-themed RPG. And if you're interested in picking up a copy of Tiny Frontiers, I will put a link to that for drive-thru review down below. Alright, that's going to do it for my review. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. We make all sorts of different content for the tabletop and board game community. Alright folks, my name is Doug, and this has been Victory Condition Gaming, because winning shouldn't be the only victory condition when you get to the table. Thanks so much for watching.